Reverend clergy, Lieutenant Governor Malcolm Wilson, Speaker Tony Travier, Attorney General Louis Lefkowitz, Controller Arthur Levitt, distinguished legislators. I'd like to take this opportunity to wish you all a happy new year, good health and happiness, and to say that I know I express for everyone our deep regrets that Senator Earl Bridges is not with us, and that we all hope for a speedy recovery and a very rapid return on his part. As representatives of the people, we meet here today specifically to take stock of the conditions of the Empire State and to view its prospects for the future. We meet as men and women of a free society that is being tried and tested and sometimes divided and confused. Yet it remains a society which endures because it is firmly based on individual responsibility and the concern for one's fellow man. We meet in a time of accelerated economic and social progress which is causing revolutionary changes of established patterns in the lives of us all. Inevitably, the speed and size of the change causes uncertainty and apprehension, as well as new hope for the future. In such a society and at such a time, it is vital that there should be the most complete two-way communication between the people and their representatives. For to be responsive, government must really understand the problems, the hopes, the fears, the needs, and the aspirations of all people. And people must have the facts and a chance to understand and to participate in the thinking and planning of government. With all this in mind, many of you joined with me again this year in a series of old-fashioned town meetings with people throughout the state. At these meetings, there was frank exchange on all the widely varying problems and hopes of the citizens and officials of local communities. It was clear that the people are concerned about the education of their children, the exposure of their children to drug addiction, their personal safety on the streets and in their homes, the rising cost of medical care and the higher taxes cutting into the increased earnings that they've worked so hard to achieve, and the general inflation and its effect on the cost of living. In the cities, the disadvantaged struggle for opportunity to achieve a decent living, a good education for their children, more adequate training for better jobs, and a chance to break free of poverty and slum life, an opportunity to share with all other Americans in a fuller life. Local governments across the state feel overburdened with pressures for more money and services, the complex administrative problems and steeply rising costs of Medicaid, the ever-increasing costs for education, aid to dependent children, and other forms of welfare. As a consequence, they are struggling with major increases in their budgets for 1968, with resulting increases in local tax rates on real estate running as high as 50% in some areas, while 28 local governments have already increased or imposed sales taxes for this year. The net result is that we here in Albany, as the executive and legislative representatives of the people of New York State, are confronted with the greatest demands in the history of the state for increased aid to local government and local schools. In considering these requests, we must understand the reasons for these rapidly increasing costs at the local level. Three principal areas responsible for sharply rising costs are primary and secondary school education, aid to dependent children under welfare, and Medicaid. We must consider these demands for major increases in state aid with a clear and respectful recognition that they spring from heartfelt convictions of their necessity. The question is, what can the state do to help local government and individual citizens meet these problems? The present state budget for the fiscal year ending March 31st is $4.6 billion. Of this, $2.67 billion already go directly to localities in the form of state aid. This represents 62% of all state revenues that are presently channeled into schools and other aid to localities, because we believe that government close to the people is the best government. Now, on top of the existing mandates for increases in aid next year, we face demands for added state aid for local assistance in next year's budget that run to staggering totals. Eliminating the overlapping and the duplications of these proposals, the total requests for increased state aid to local governments and school districts in the next fiscal year come to approximately $1.5 billion. Now, to raise that kind of money for additional state aid would require nearly doubling the present personal state income tax, or increasing the state sales tax from 2 cents to 6 cents on the dollar. Obviously, this is out of the question. But the seriousness of the situation is clear, and it is not just a problem in New York State. A similar situation exists in all the states throughout the country. We may well be reaching a point where the level of expectations of the American people is rising at a rate which is outrunning our capacity to raise the revenues on a sound basis, on a basis that will not seriously affect economic growth and increase job opportunities. Now, this is not just a state or a local problem. This is a national and international problem as well. What the federal government does at the national level affects the economic and financial climate of the states within which we have to operate, as well as the nation as a whole. It is essential to us as states, as well as to the nation, to reduce the gap on international trade. And I'd like to say that I was very pleased to read in the paper that the President is taking decisive steps to do just that, as was announced yesterday. We've got to also reduce the federal deficit in order to restore confidence in the dollar abroad, to ease the money market and to lower interest rates at home, and to halt the quickening pace of inflation. But action by the federal government alone is not sufficient. As a people and as local officials, we must face the fact that government at all levels, just like a family, cannot spend way beyond its means for long without weakening its credit and undermining its strength. We must exercise a determination to strike the balance between what is doable and what is desirable. We must judge what we want by what we can afford. This is the balance I have sought in the programs submitted for your consideration in this annual message and in the executive budget I shall offer 2 weeks from now. This is the balance I urge your honorable bodies to seek in your actions as the legislative representatives of the people of New York. The executive budget will be a tight economy budget, but without cutting those essential services to meet those essential human needs. Anticipated growth in revenues under present taxes will cover mandated and essential increases in state operations and capital construction items not covered by authorized bonds. But as far as state aid increases to local government and local school districts are concerned, the plain truth is that we can come nowhere near meeting the $1.5 billion additional state aid which they want. We will have to hold the increase in state aid to something in the order of $500 million, even though it will be difficult to do so without seriously hurting essential services. And we must face the fact that whatever additional state aid is provided will have to come from new or increased state taxes. Obviously, nobody wants to pay more taxes, and nobody wants to recommend more taxes. But nothing of value is free. If people truly want and need services, there must be taxes to pay for them. What makes the tax situation so difficult for state and local government is the fact that the great tax collector in New York is not the state, but the federal government. The federal government collects 68% of all the taxes paid in New York State. Local government collects 18%. But the state gets only 14%, and of that 14%, we give back 62% to local governments and school districts. Now, I feel that any new revenue derived from additional state taxes in 1968-69 budget should go back to local government and local school districts to help hold down the pressure on local real property taxpayers. But local governments also will still have to strike a balance between their needs and the financial resources. And now, within this framework, let me discuss specific proposals vital to meeting our responsibilities. First, governmental structure. An important element in the state government's ability to meet the needs of people is its administrative organization, which must be designed to reflect the problems of our times and be able to deliver services efficiently and at the least possible cost. To further the responsiveness of state government, I intend to recommend for first passage a constitutional amendment allowing greater flexibility in the reorganization of the executive branch of government. In the meantime, I'm now prepared to offer specific new proposals to help meet the problems of urban areas, economic development, and social development, which can be carried out under present authority. These include a Social Development Planning Commission, an Office of Urban Innovation, a review of human rights laws, and a new unit in the Commerce Department to provide special emphasis on the development and promotion of scientific industry and applied research. And we are also studying the assignment of functions among state departments, particularly in the area of personal health, environmental sanitation, natural resource, recreation, and regulatory activities. 2, war on crime. A fundamental responsibility of government is to preserve order under law. This basic duty is sharply underscored today by a steep rise in crime and civil disorder. This administration and your honorable bodies have worked together successfully over the years to promote training of local police, to strengthen state police, and to provide our law enforcement officials with better legal and technical tools for combating crime. Today, I urge you to consider the following additional steps as essential to sustaining a relentless attack on crime. First, a 500-man increase in the state police to concentrate on organized crime, narcotics, and riot control. 2, a minimum salary for local police. 3, full-time district attorneys in larger counties. 4, incentives to encourage consolidation of small police forces into more efficient, larger units. 5, clear legal authority for wiretapping and electronic surveillance where essential to fight crime with all proper safeguards of basic constitutional rights. 6, revision of the new penal law to clarify the authority of the police officer and the private citizen to use the force necessary to apprehend a criminal and to defend himself. 7, stricter arms control. And I'm also looking forward to the forthcoming report of the Governor's Committee on Criminal Offenders, which should provide the basis for future recommendations for rehabilitating offenders. These and other crime-fighting measures will be set forth in detail in a later special message. 3, transforming slums into decent communities. Our nation's greatest domestic challenge is to end the despair, the degradation, and the sense of futility that pervades the slums of our cities. For too long, the hopes of those denied the fullness of American life have been betrayed. Time is running short. We must release a full-scale attack on intolerable slum conditions, physically, social, and economic, if we are to transform these slums into decent communities. Therefore, I urge your honorable bodies to support the following actions. A, community renewal. 1, State Urban Development Corporation. Within the coming weeks, I will submit a special message and proposed legislation to establish a nonprofit New York State Urban Development Corporation. The corporation would have the power, in cooperation with private enterprise and local government, to undertake the planning, development, and construction of housing, light industry, commercial, educational, recreational, cultural enterprises in our city core areas. 2, community development article. I will recommend a new community development article authorizing state participation with the private sector in comprehensive community development to replace the present housing article in the state constitution. 3, loan guarantee for urban core businesses. I'll propose a constitutional amendment authorizing a loan guarantee program for small and medium-sized businesses in urban core areas where credit is so difficult to obtain. B, job opportunities in slum areas. Basic to the accomplishment of the aspirations of every individual for himself and his family is the opportunity for a good job. In order to increase job opportunities, I recommend the following additional steps in this area. That the state's present manpower development training program be expanded to provide allowances for job trainees in small business establishments. That a state urban job incentive board be created to administer a tax incentive program for firms providing significant numbers of new jobs in the city core areas. That legislation be enacted requiring companies writing fire and extended coverage insurance to join a pool to provide protection to insure property in the central city areas. C, community services. Too often jobs, guidance, and health and other services needed most by the poor are either unknown or inaccessible to them. The executive budget will therefore contain requests for funds to provide a full range of information services concerning health care, home economics, housing, job training, and job opportunities. D, educational opportunities in slum areas. 1, vocational education. To help individuals obtain the skills to survive in a modern economy, I'll recommend changes in the state law to remove restrictive entrance requirements and age limits to vocational training. These changes will increase vocational training opportunities for those who need them the most. Daycare programs. The executive budget will request funds for local daycare programs, thus giving mothers willing and able to work the opportunity to do so, and thus afford increased educational and cultural opportunities to the children through the daycare centers programs. Pre-kindergarten and other educational opportunity programs. The executive budget will also request increased funds to expand and improve the highly successful pre-kindergarten programs which help the disadvantaged children to overcome social and economic handicaps. To expand Project Seek, which helps disadvantaged high school students to continue their studies, and Project Able, which identifies gifted but underprivileged children and gives them a chance to develop their abilities. And to expand the state's urban college centers, which offer post-high school courses to disadvantaged students not yet qualified for admission to regular colleges. Now let me turn to an important subject, health. I will submit recommendations in the field of health which will recognize the fundamental problems we face today in this area. The highlights of this program are as follows. Universal health insurance. Last year, your leaders and I jointly sponsored a bill to establish the nation's first universal state health insurance program. The bill provided basic health coverage for the vast majority of employed men and women and their families, with employers and employees sharing the cost. This proposal has been the subject of extensive public hearings conducted by the Joint Legislative Committee on the Problems of Public Health. I'm convinced that universal health insurance is the soundest first line of defense for financing health care. Government-financed programs like Medicaid should serve as a reserve or second line of defense to protect the medically needy and persons whose insurance benefits have become exhausted. Health insurance preserves the relationship between the doctor, the patient, and the insurer, which has traditionally worked so well. And unlike public medical care, health insurance gives the individual a personal stake in the financial soundness of the system and encourages wiser utilization. With health insurance, we avoid unnecessary government involvement and also the reluctance of many people to utilize publicly financed health care, even though they may be eligible and need the care. Furthermore, we would not be at the mercy of arbitrary Washington decisions, which, as in Medicaid, first aroused the people's hopes and caused the states to conform to federal standards, only to cut back both the standards and the financial support. In the weeks immediately ahead, I will work closely with your leaders and with the Joint Legislative Committee on the problems of public health, in an effort to reach agreement on the many difficult policy questions involved in advancing a universal health insurance plan. B, Medicaid. Legislation recently passed by the Congress would drastically reduce federal participation in the Medicaid programs. New York State and its local governments will lose $43 million in federal funds the first federal fiscal year and $61.7 million the second year. While this bill was still in conference between the House and the Senate in Washington, I named a special cabinet committee to study its impact on New York and have been working closely with the committee and its expert advisors. I shall submit very shortly to your honorable bodies specific proposals to cope with the federal cutbacks and the skyrocketing costs of Medicaid to the states and to local governments. C, narcotics program. I'm pleased to report that the Narcotic Addiction Control Program, adopted overwhelmingly by your honorable bodies, has in less than 10 months of operation already brought more than 2,000 addicts under the supervision and treatment of the Narcotic Addiction Control Commission. Under the provisions of the executive budget, which I will submit, we should have by the end of this year 8,000 addicts off the streets where they threaten people and under treatment where they can help themselves. I urge your continued support of this vital program. D, abortion law reform. I will appoint a select committee of leaders in the fields of medicine, law, and theology, and representatives of civic groups to review our present state laws on abortion in relation to what other states and nations are doing, and to work with the legislative and executive branches in developing proposed new legislation on this subject. E, hospital and nursing homes. A large percentage of the hospitals throughout the state have obsolete and inefficient physical plants, and therefore maintenance and operating costs are inordinately high. 2 years ago, your honorable bodies approved a special program for self-liquidating State Housing Finance Agency loans to build nursing homes. This program has been highly successful. I shall therefore propose a similar loan program for modernization of existing hospitals and, where necessary, construction of new hospitals through the Housing Finance Agency. I shall also propose a substantial increase in the agency's loan authorization to be made available for nursing home loans. F, health services. I'll propose establishment of a cardiovascular research center at Roswell Park Memorial Institute, New York's world-renowned cancer center. I will recommend legislation to provide for treatment of additional major respiratory diseases in existing state tuberculosis hospitals. Now let me turn to another vitally important area, consumer protection. Consumers deserve increased government protection from the unscrupulous few who cheat the public and who prey with special cruelty on the poor. Attorney General Lefkowitz has saved New York's consumers millions of dollars annually through his Consumer Fraud Bureau. This year, we will seek new consumer law protection, including the following: auto repair licensing, truth in lending, statewide meat inspection, and auto insurance recommendations. Transportation. As a result of last year's legislation and voter approval of the transportation bond issue, the new State Department of Transportation, in cooperation with local governments and local authorities, is preparing a master plan for transportation for the entire state. In the executive budget, I will recommend for your approval the initial projects throughout the state to improve airports, bus systems, and other mass transportation facilities, as well as continuation of the highway construction program. Highway safety. In spite of efforts at all levels of government to halt the carnage on our highways, deaths and serious injuries continue to rise as more and more cars crowd the roads. I will submit for your consideration a full range of highway safety measures dealing with such areas as driver training, licensing, law enforcement, drug and alcohol research, and safety administration. 7, economic growth. This administration from the outset has worked to foster a climate for economic growth and increased job opportunities. And it is gratifying indeed to be able to report to you that the highest index of business activity and the lowest unemployment rate in the state's history were recorded in November of last year, the last month for which figures are presently available. We will continue to build on the policies that have done so much to help make this outstanding record possible. A, electric power development. The Electric Power Committee, which I appointed, presented its report last month. The report makes a major contribution to the future power program of our state and reconciles differences on power policy which prevented passage of the program introduced last year. I shall present specific proposals in line with this report so that we can achieve together a program that will assure the future growth and development of New York State, meeting our needs for sufficient and low-cost industrial power, holding down costs to individual consumers, and providing full utilization of the state's public and private power resources. B, improve social insurance for working men and women. In view of the increased costs of living, it is clearly time to improve benefits under the state's employer-financed workman compensation and unemployment insurance, as well as disability insurance, and I will propose legislation to do so. Migrant labor. I will also recommend a series of proposals and legislation to improve the economic opportunity and employment protection of migrant laborers who play so important a role in the harvest of New York's crops. Post-Vietnam transition. Recently, I announced that I would appoint a post-Vietnam study group to help New York minimize the social and economic impact of the conversion from war to peace and to prepare for expanding opportunities in the future. To accomplish such development, government in cooperation with private groups must plan intelligently for future economic growth and opportunity and create a framework of incentives to mobilize the resources and managerial skills of private enterprise for the unfinished war on poverty, ignorance, and disease. And now, in conclusion, this then is the administration's program to meet the essential needs of the people of our state on the soundest possible fiscal terms. It is a program dedicated to what is attainable, not just what is desirable. It is a program that seeks to pursue that elusive but ideal balance of government in which public order is preserved, human progress is advanced, and governmental responsibility is practiced. We live in troubling, even divisive times. I have sought to submit to your honorable bodies today a program to help balance the various forces at work in our society so that we may preserve order, yet welcome change, and build on the best of the past as we move into the future. With God's help, let us work together to the attainment of these objectives in the fulfillment of our obligations to serve the needs of the people of New York State. And I say, in conclusion, that this is not going to be an easy session, but it's a very important one, and I look forward to the opportunity of working with you. Thank you very much.
This is the Capitol in Albany, and that's the end of the feed. Thank you, gentlemen.